Very nice. Well, thank you, Morgan Cochneuer, and welcome to Sonoma Sounds. You are our inaugural, almost said host, I'm the host, inaugural guest.
I could
So,
be the host. You can try.
what can you tell us about that tune that you just played?
Well, it's called Turkey in the Straw. And I thought I'd play it because it is sort of my go-to tune when I'm playing out. Usually playing like on the street somewhere,
Mhm.
because ever since I started playing the fiddle, uh, since I'd already played other instruments, I'd already played guitar, other strings. I picked up the fiddle fairly quickly, but I needed a lot of practice,
Mhm.
and so I went out on the street, downtown Santa Rosa and Petaluma and just around, and I started playing on the street. And over the years, it's just been something I've done to, keep my chops up, keep and make a little spare change,
Mhm.
publicity. Sometimes I get interest in um, music lessons and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So playing on the street has always been something that I've just gone back to. And whenever I play on the street, I just seem to always play Turkey in the Straw. It's sort of like, the ice cream truck song, because it's
Mhm.
that, and you hear that, oh, they're in the neighborhood. Do-do-do-do-do-do. It's just such a familiar little happy tune. I remember as a kid, because I didn't learn fiddle music as a kid. I just remember hearing do your ears hang low, do they wobble tune for that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
And and then it's just a great tune to play on the fiddle. You can do a lot of fun stuff with it. And so I've I've learned a lot of different tunes over the years, and I just stand there playing on the street, and the one that just I have to play Turkey in the Straw.
So you mentioned you play guitar, you play fiddle. What was your first instrument?
My first instrument was the trumpet. Did that in the fourth grade.
Mhm.
Fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, my school had an orchestra, and I had a really inspiring music teacher there named Mr. Stratemeyer. And he wore a tuxedo at our elementary school concerts. My parents, I just thought that was normal because that was like, well, that's what my teacher's doing. And my parents were like, he's wearing a tuxedo. He's serious about it. So, anyhow, I just didn't really like the trumpet after the marching band in junior high. I started to listen to a lot more rock and roll, like guitar stuff. I
Mhm.
wanted to learn guitar. So really, I started guitar in when I started high school. And that was the instrument, that I stuck with, and where, um, yeah, what I learned on the trumpet, I picked up a few things about reading music, and, it helped me grow but I wasn't learning, like music theory on it and stuff. I wasn't
Mhm.
actually playing. No one was showing me how to improvise or turning me on to horn players, like the jazz, stuff. So it just grew a little dull for me, and so uh, I did guitar throughout high school, but I was just kind of doing it on my own. I was taking lessons and jamming with my friends that were in bands. Just kind of a bit shy. I never really, in that period of time, I just didn't really find my place. I knew, like, tried to start a band, never really followed through with it.
Hmm.
I kind of didn't really want to be up on stage looking dumb in front of my friends. That's what it came down to. There's like
Hmm.
hardcore, like, image stuff, all those. I grew up in Bakersfield, and we were just worshiping all those bands that came out of LA, the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Jane's Addiction,
Uh-huh.
all those. It just was like, to be in a band, you had to be super cool. And I don't know, I loved music, but I didn't really find my place. And I
Hmm.
loved that music too. But I went to college to study music more.
Hmm.
And then I went to Sonoma State, and Sonoma State University really broadened my horizons, and I learned a lot more about jazz. I learned a lot more about music in general. I met a lot of different, people who, um, like in Northern California and Marin and Sonoma, there's kind of a deadhead scene. There are
Hmm.
some deadheads in Bakersfield too, but it was, up here it's like, I met more musicians who actually really like were into the music and played it, and just there's the wine country, like, jazz scene.
Hmm.
There's and we had a great faculty at Sonoma State in the 90s. I think some of them are still there. Randy Vincent, my guitar teacher, and Mel Graves, who passed on, but also George Marsh and Will Johnson. And so I went from wanting to play rock and roll in high school, and I also was interested in classical guitar.
Hmm.
I was interested in folk guitar in high school too. I wanted to play flamenco for a little while. I went through all these different little periods, but um, then, I went to Sonoma State and started to get into more traditional music, older music. I
Hmm.
started to get more curious about all this stuff. Um, and then I went home to Bakersfield on a summer vacation,
Hmm.
and someone told me about a bluegrass jam at a music store. That music store called Busker's Music in Bakersfield. They had a bluegrass jam every Saturday, and so I'd heard about bluegrass through my survey of US music class in college, really, because there wasn't really any of it in Bakersfield growing up. There was country music,
Right.
the modern, what, the early 90s, it was Achy Breaky Heart and stuff like that. I had no interest in that really, so I was just not even aware of it. It was something that I just hadn't really thought much about. And then when I heard bluegrass, I just was like, wow, this kind of like jazz, because they're all taking solos.
Hmm.
And it has this kind of communal, you know, and I liked the rhythm of it. I liked how there was no drums, but you had like the bass and the banjo, and you had the man. You had all these instruments working together. Because I'd been just starting to really study that kind of stuff. In if you're jazz, if you're going the jazz route, in usually it's in college, where you go to choose which stream you go.
Hmm.
Um, you study a lot. You study things like the feel and the rhythm section and the groove and the beat and stuff like that. And all those things that really matter if you're going to be out, playing. It just seemed to me jazz was the way to go. And um and so if I wanted to play bluegrass, I could pick because I could hear the chords because I was studying jazz. All of a sudden, I
Mhm.
could hear more chords and scale relationships, and I
Mhm.
could understand what they were doing as far as passing solos around and stuff. So it just blew my mind because I um, I just had heard all this modern country music where the fiddle is really kind of in the mix, but not very featured. The drums are,
Mhm.
it's very rock and roll influenced, and I just really like that sound So I started going to those bluegrass jams on Saturdays, and I got a banjo. That was the first thing I got. A banjo and a book by Fred Sokolow on melodic bluegrass banjo.
Mhm.
And someone was saying, "Why are you starting with that? You should learn some banjo rolls, or start with the Scruggs stuff." But it was the recommendation of the store owner. He
Okay.
said, "You should get this book." It had a cassette, and it had Turkey in the Straw. It had Devil's Dream and Sailor's Hornpipe, and it just had a whole bunch of the standard tunes, which I
Mhm.
needed because I didn't really know them. And I had it all tapped out on the banjo.
Mhm.
So that was the first thing I did that was really like different than it was on. It felt like it was kind of on my own. None of my friends were into it.
Mhm.
These were like, to me, these were really old people. you know.
Right.
And I remember I took my mom down to the store after she'd been hearing about these old. She's like, "These people aren't that old. You've been telling me about all these old people." I'm like, "Yeah, but mom, I'm like, come on, I'm 18.
Yeah.
I'm jamming with this guy who's like 50, 60. They're old."
Right. Yeah.
But there were a few of them who were, maybe some octogenarians. Like there were a couple of the truly older, but it's generally, you know, um, just grown-ups, what I
Mhm.
consider a grown-up jam now. And but they were definitely playing the older stuff.
Mhm.
And it was this whole thing about like these are older people, and I, since everything, in high school was all about what was new, and I was in we were trying, we still like music from the 60s and like classic stuff. There's some appreciation, but the most emphasis was on new. And
Mhm.
it shifted for me into, I wanted to check out what had gone on, because I realized that country music came from somewhere and it had changed.
Mhm.
Once I realized that it was similar to jazz, and that it attracted me that same way that jazz did, and that's what it used to be like before.
Mhm.
Once and I just realized, wow, that's so cool, because I actually feel like I really like that. I kind of wish I was in like back in the days, sitting on a porch with my community, like, hey, maybe there's a mandolin player next door and a fiddler
Mhm.
down the street, and you know what I mean, we're gonna just get together and play. You mean like that, because it's, everything is so about, you know um if you get into like the teenage band whole thing, it can be kind of mean, to be honest.
Mhm.
I mean, everyone's trying to be cool, everyone's trying to outdo each other. And even though bluegrass, um it has a competitiveness as well. um and old time music is a little less competitive, but still, it's just way more toned down, and more, you can tell this is music for everyone.
Hmm.
It's for the old people, this is for the little kids, it's for everyone in between. And I always like that kind of stuff too. There are a few things um, in Baker's. Oh, yeah, we had a ska band that was like that, I remember. Ska music being kind of like the thing that brought everyone together too,
Uh-huh.
you know?
And that was big in the 90s too.
Yeah. But I just thought, this music is super cool.
Hmm.
It's the folk tradition,
Hmm.
like in the real sense, not on the stage sense, but like in the real sense, because I discovered it at these jams and they were really fun. Um, Built up the nerve to start just going in there and trying to play a few melodies, and they encouraged me. It was really great,
Hmm.
you know. And and I tell my friends about, and then I occasionally, find someone who had a little bit of uh, knew something about bluegrass or old time.
Hmm.
Anyhow, it went from being this thing I was doing on my own to, and I would just do it for a little bit. I did it like in the summer. I'd try to learn some banjo, and then I'd go back to school and get back to jazz guitar, you know. And the next summer I got a mandolin. I was taking an improv class at the JC, and I
Hmm.
got an electric mandolin at the music store across the street from the JC, and I brought it to my improv class. So I did some jazz improv on the mandolin, which was really cool. Helped me, and that helped me actually because I eventually did not stick with the banjo. I could still play it a little bit, but I did not stick with it. I switched to the mandolin and then the fiddle really.
Hmm.
Um, and it was probably getting used to the tuning of the mandolin. It was two things that helped me build up the nerve to actually become a fiddler,
Hmm.
which is I got used to the tuning of the mandolin and the scale and the way that the notes are the same, Um, and I met Kenny Hall.
Hmm.
That was the other thing, because fiddle music to me, it always sounded so just fancy, and it still does. It has a lot of expression in it,
Hmm.
and um, when I heard Kenny Hall play the fiddle, there was just this other expression. That's all I can say. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but when I heard him play the fiddle, because I didn't know he even played the fiddle. I kept hearing about how he played the mandolin. He's
Hmm.
this mandolin, well renowned as a mandolinist, and uh, but it was hearing him play the fiddle that made me just go, "Wait, I can do this. I can." There's something about it, and it's bold and it's forward sounding, but it's clear and it's not kind of it, that mysticism of you hear like the way that they go up the neck and use the kind of and I know how to manipulate the strings like to get that kind of bluesy stuff from playing the guitar. I know how to
Hmm.
slide around, so theoretically I know how it's done, but I was not a violinist growing up. I was not a classically trained violinist since I was
Hmm.
a little kid or anything like that. So Kenny Hall's fiddle style had kind of limited technique.
Hmm.
It wasn't really um, all over the place. Um, there are certain things
Hmm.
that he did very consistently, like, and I can demonstrate this,
Yeah.
like just that real simple. It's not that simple, really, but um, that fourth finger going up into the A note along with the A.
Sliding into a unison.
And there's just a way, every fiddler does that. That
Hmm.
is a fiddle. That's just a typical thing.
Hmm.
Classical people don't, though. It is something that, it really splits you off into that world of what is a fiddle and what is a violin.
Yeah.
Because violin is, and if you're playing an orchestra, any classical music, unless it's written into the music that you're going to be doing that double sound, you wouldn't just do it.
Right.
And it was the way that, like, we're just going to do that. And I remember it's like Angeline the Baker. And these little slides too. It was the
Hmm.
little slides. There weren't a whole lot of them, but they were in just the right places,
Uh-huh.
you know? And just the way it would come down into that wow.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
You know, it's um it's a fairly uh it's not the most advanced fiddle thing, but it's not the first thing you learn either.
Right. Yeah.
Because to really get that, and then to play, to have that finger really nailing that unison, and then to have the dexterity of the other fingers working with it, it's something that took me a while. So I could realize that he was playing a fiddle style that was kind of simple but kind of
Hmm.
sophisticated.
Hmm.
And then if you really get into it, oh, it's way deep.
Yeah.
His fiddling is amazing, but you have to hear him play all the stuff he could play on the fiddle. You have to hear him play, Sally Gooden and Leather Breeches and Orange Blossom Special and all the square dance tunes.
Hmm.
And there's this just certain feel and a certain bounce.
Yeah.
And it was different. It was like the way that the fiddle carried the music had this rhythm that was just it spoke to me. It spoke to me. It was like, I can do that. I want to do that. Nothing's going to stop me from doing that.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a fiddle. I'm going to get over this fear of the fiddle. And I want to play with excitement like that.
Yeah.
Because I think I can do it. I think it's
Hmm.
just easy enough that I can do it.
Yeah. Well, how about you? Would you mind playing a tune you learned from Kenny Hall for us?
Oh, sure. Well, I mentioned Sally Gooden, so I'll play that actually.
Hmm.
Sal was good. She was a good. She was good, but her legs were wooden.
Gotta have that
It's
tag in
all
there.
Sally Gooden,
Yeah.
and if you compare it to other versions, it's just it's elusive because the phrasing's both like the same and different. It goes through all those different parts,
Hmm.
and it all comes from the Eck Robertson famous recording.
Hmm.
And you hear contest fiddlers play all these different versions of Sally Gooden, um, but they generally have kind of a more of a swingish kind of a feel, and just kind
Hmm.
of it's just like a that rare that there. I try to do something that would kind of demonstrate his. I don't want to say like overuse of it, but
Uh-huh.
when you only are kind of using a certain repertoire of uh, I want to say not variations, um, ornamentation,
Uh-huh.
variation. When you're using kind of a limited vocabulary of those,
Hmm.
you know, it just becomes it becomes a part of the sound of the music, you
Hmm.
know. So almost every note might end with a round,
Yeah.
but it's doing that that just kind of keeps it. I mean, that one was so yeah, Sally Gooden. That was a strange kind of, and I think it actually skips a beat in a couple spots. There's like one of the parts where it's just missing two beats, and so I can't really play that version unless someone knows that.
Right. Yeah.
I just have to take out that one little variation and know how to straighten it out. But
So, how did you meet Kenny Hall?
I met Kenny Hall at a music camp called Sweets Mill, and Sweets Mill is a music camp that was started in the 60s or maybe even the late 50s out in the Sierra Nevada foothills out there.
Hmm.
And it's a music camp that has lots of folk musicians playing lots of different instruments. And Kenny Hall, he was always a kind of a um, professor of Sweets Mill or whatever. A lot of people learned from him there.
Hmm.
So he was, I had heard about him. I went to Sweets Mill and heard people talk about this guy, and he didn't show up that year. I met him the first time I met him was on the
Hmm.
side of the road and broken down in a van with his wife on the way to Sweets Mill, and I was leaving.
Uh-huh.
I was so bummed because I'd heard all this stuff about him. That he played mandolin with his fingernail, and that he was one of the um, best traditional musicians in the country or in the
Hmm.
world. That's the what he was introduced to me as.
Yeah.
This is Kenny Hall. He's uh, uh, a guy that's part of the Sweets Mill music camp community, and there at that Sweets Mill camp they have Kenny Hall. Kenny Hall is one of the best mandolin players in the world for traditional music, and it was specifically said that for traditional music. So
Hmm.
don't expect him to bust out some wild jazz improv. Don't expect
Hmm.
him to hot shot with David Grisman on some you know um, you might be disappointed if you're looking for the best in terms of someone who can play the fastest or have if you're judging by a lot of the standards a lot of people judge by it's standards I was even judging by at
Hmm.
that point, because I just realized when I actually heard him play that greatness was just something so much deeper. I already knew it. I already knew that too.
Hmm.
But he was like a living example of that. Like it was just so great the way he was. And so, and when you say, he's one of the best mandolin players for traditional music, you're saying that he could take a lot of requests.
Hmm.
That's what he could play a lot of just so much music from Mexico and from Ireland and from Scotland and from all over the place. And so um a typical scene, like having Kenny Hall and neighborhoods around, and people are showing up and they're just shouting out, hey, play a Portuguese tune,
Hmm.
or play an Italian tune, or
Hmm.
and when he would do it, he would tend to play. He tends he tended to play the tunes that were important, that they knew, even tunes that they had overlooked in their own culture.
Hmm.
You know, um, Kenny Hall Mexican tunes for one. Let's talk about those because I've met people that play Mexican music, and I'll ask them, "Oh, do you play this or do you play that?" The ones that Kenny played, and it's like, well, yeah, we played that in school
Hmm.
when we were kids,
Hmm.
elementary school. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like I realized that, wait, okay, so playing Me de Como Esa Tuna, or playing, Las Chapiñecas, or playing, my Jarabe Tapatio
Hmm.
might just feel like to them like, oh, it's just like playing, Oh Susanna or Home
Yeah.
on the Range, or, it's not really music that people generally go to hear. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
And it's sort of music that's been taken for granted,
Hmm.
you know and that was the thing about Kenny and his love of that traditional music,
Hmm.
is if it was just old and had been kind of forgotten about or taken for granted or just not really thought of as real music, he would give it that life again.
Hmm.
Home on the Range is a great example because he loved that song, and he did all the parts, the verses that were shortened, and the bridge that was not usually introduced to people.
Hmm.
And he did it with such a just pure, love and passion. And um, I mean, who does that? Who just really sits and does? Everyone's going to be like, okay, if I'm going to do something that corny or, old, and like I'm gonna have to do something. I gotta put like, a hip hop beat on it, or I gotta at least have. And with Kenny, it was like, no, he was like, you don't really have to have that. You just, because it was all so beautiful what it was.
Hmm.
And he would, of course, he would add his own, flair to it. It wasn't like just reciting something, but I'm just saying, with him, you were allowed to play something that was just simple
Hmm.
and treat it like real.
Hmm.
And I think that was something that really spoke to me. I was in music school.
Hmm.
Everyone's trying to learn all their scale, everyone's trying to do everything, everyone's trying to become everything, all, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And you can never be it all. There's always going to be someone who can play faster or has written more tunes than you, or has, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just the beauty of sitting down and just enjoying a simple song.
Hmm.
There's like no real agenda to it, because it's not going to sell. You're going to be like, hey, listen to my super simple version of Home on the Range that I'm going to make millions off of. No, you know what I mean? But I just thought he was the best in that way. So how I met him was I was leaving Sweets. I'd heard about him. I was leaving Sweetsmill. He had car trouble in the van on the side of the road, and I met him. It's like, hey, I heard all this great stuff about you. Take his hand. I was like, maybe I'll get to hear you next year. It's like, okay. Next year, I came back to Sweetsmill. And this is before, you could just look stuff up on the internet. And he had albums and stuff, but I didn't even know about that. I didn't know that he'd recorded records or anything like that. So I literally never even heard him play. I just heard about him, and I went back to Sweetsmill a year later, and he got this. He showed up. There was all this excitement. There's crowd swarmed around him, and he went into Guinness on a Saucer. Which is, I should play that little snippet of that, because that was how he would get. I like to play Turkey in the Straw. Kenny's was Guinness on a Saucer to get things going. He'd be and then it's like, or we know what young Kenny Hall wants. We know what young Kenny Hall wants. We know what young Kenny Hall wants. Guinness on a saucer. We know what is good for him. We know what is good for him. So it blew my mind because it was silly as hell.
Yeah.
It was like, and it went on and on and on and on. Yeah. Because Kenny's blind, you see. Yeah. And so he would do that song to find out who he was playing with. And it was a good, simple tune that could just get everyone playing. G, here we go. Da, 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 da. And then you go, what you drinking? And you go around the room and you'd shout out, I'm drinking a 7-Up. And we know what young Morgan wants.
Yeah.
And so you get your name, you get, and it was a way to just get the jam going and include everyone, find out what their names, find out what they're drinking.
Yeah.
And I just thought, like, this goofy guy is what all this fuss is about. I was just like in love with it. I thought it was the coolest thing, because it went from there right into play a Portuguese tune. Yeah. And he started singing in Italian, and then all of a sudden he's just like playing some little old ragtime tune, and it started from that simple, happy, very like inclusive, and it just deeper, and then just through that first, about maybe an hour or so of that original session of hearing him play, I got it. I was like, this guy, he just doesn't sound like anyone I've ever heard in my life. Not even close. Yet he's playing everything that everyone knows. Yeah. He's playing all the tunes that I knew, like stuff that I grew up on with the missing verses that I never even heard. Some Mexican guy comes around the corner and he starts playing, and then that guy starts singing along. Meets a Portuguese person, plays a song, and they start singing. And it was just the coolest thing to realize that where everyone had been trying to learn how to, play in a cool band, or everyone had been trying to learn how to, hot dog the solo and play really fast, or, get their chops up. And that's all very good. I'm really not trying to insult that, or I have a high respect for mastery of musical instruments, right? And it's no joke. You study that John Coltrane stuff. There's it is very deep too.
Mhm.
But a lot of the jazz people and a lot of musicians are also multicultural,
Mhm.
have a kind of a multiculturalist thing. You know, they play their music will be influenced by other people, but
Mhm.
there was something about Kenny doing this old stuff that tapped deeper into their and being able to connect with them.
Mhm.
I had never just met anyone like that who had really gone that route.
Yeah.
Like, you know, um, and then I found out, you know, how he did it. How he did it was he was going to the school for the blind, and they were trying to teach him classical music, and he was learning. He was more interested in learning from records, and he was more interested in learning from people. You know, he learned a lot of Mexican music from this guy, Luis Vasquez, I think, and you know, he would hang out with them, learn a bunch of their music, and move on. He'd go and hang out at the Swiss Cafe and learn a bunch of Swedish tunes and Norwegian stuff, whatever, and then just move on. Go play with the Happy Hayseeds, learn a bunch of their tunes, and
Mhm.
move on. And he just kept, you know, it was like everyone he ever played with kept just adding to the repertoire.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like you join a band, you have that repertoire, you play that for a while, then you know, it's like, and in order to play with him, you had to know all, because he would just play any of it at any time.
And we should say, didn't he know over 1,000?
Yeah, there were like 1,100 that were listed and collected. There were when they were actually Vicky Mendegray and Terry Barrett, I think, were the ones who documented a lot of his and actually counted and listed those tunes. And Vicky
Mhm.
actually published a music book of
Mhm.
a few hundred of those that she transcribed. And yeah, he knew a lot of stuff. It was, you know, and didn't matter how long you played with him. His he would just come out with something new. All of a sudden he'd play some tune like, wait, where have you been hiding that?
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, you know, I learned that a long time ago. I just never really played it. It was like trapped way down in there.
Yeah.
And I mean, these were pretty complex tunes when you get
Mhm.
into a lot of them have key changes. A lot of them, you know, they might be more simple than Mozart and a lot of stuff that you hear, Mozart and John Coltrane. But they are, you know, it's a long time to get them
Yeah.
right and to actually get them to that level where they're internalized and memorized and you can play them. So and the other thing that's notable about him is, you know, he wasn't he wasn't using any devices like he'd buy the record and he'd just learn it off the record by
Yeah.
listening. He'd listen to it for 2 weeks and then he'd try to play the tune. But some of them are like, you know, they're not that easy just to pick up on the
Mhm.
record. I listened to some of those records and it's like, wow, it's just like there's a lot there.
Mhm.
And I started to equate that to like, well, what if I just say like it wasn't old time mandolin, say it was like rock and roll guitar solos
Mhm.
that he had done that with.
Yeah.
This guy would have been able to play like every guitar solo note for note.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He would and without I mean he did have some musical training, but to show him to teach that, he did that all on his own,
Mhm.
you know, just because he thought it was cool. He thought it
Yeah.
was neat. So anyhow, that was the backstory of how I met him and how I was just became enamored with his style and wanted to go that direction. I did end up playing with him a lot, becoming
Mhm.
friends with him and recording. And we went to music camps together, go pick him up in Fresno and take him to Grass Valley. And, we spent hours like in car rides,
Mhm.
talking, listening to music together. I got I got pretty deep into like hit kind of the way he thought about music, even some things that he, wouldn't necessarily play at a jam session,
Mhm.
but when you hung out with them, just like killing time, talk about a lot of those things. And so that helped me get a little bit more of the subtlety, of
Mhm.
it. And but it was those years and being, indoctrinated into like, okay, now I can actually play enough old time to get by. I can play
Right.
enough Irish music to get by. I can play enough Mexican music to get by. I can, and my jazz repertoire has grown too, because he also
Mhm.
knew all these like pop tunes from the 20s that were also considered, he could play Sweet Georgia Brown
Uh-huh.
too, but just wouldn't take a solo on it, just play the melody.
Yeah.
And so then I ended up having that experience myself because I had a band that played Mexican music and we got hired by Mexican restaurants.
Mhm.
Um, I started going to Irish sessions. I started going to, out in the world and then finding that I could fit in, finding that I could make these connections. And really like the Mexican restaurant thing really blew my mind, because I still don't really speak Spanish. I can sing a few songs in Spanish.
Mhm.
But I had no idea how it would be received,
Yeah.
you know, like are they gonna look like uh are they gonna look at me like I'm invading their culture?
Mhm.
You know, we just were like, we wanted to do these songs and threw together a demo tape, went down to the nearest, restaurant, and they were like, this is so cool. They loved it. So they gave us our first gig.
Mhm.
And then I had a couple of years there of playing these Mexican restaurants, and they were just so nice to us. These people, the restaurant owners, the people that we play with when we play, and very little did I ever get any sort of like, who's this white guy playing, our music? It
Uh-huh.
wasn't like that at all. It
Uh-huh.
was like, oh wow, I would hit them by surprise,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, and
And,
then they'd request, oh, do you know Jalisco
uh-huh.
and stuff like that, stuff that I wouldn't have known had I not known Kenny Hall. And this stuff that I wouldn't have known it. I wouldn't have learned it growing up. I wouldn't have learned it in music school,
Mhm. Right.
but it was meaningful.
Yeah.
It was as a way to actually connect with people. And then I've really been reflecting on that a lot lately because of all this political stuff that we've dealt
Mhm.
with in this big divide that we've gotten in. And I just think back, man, how amazing was that? How amazing was that I actually met someone that helped me, you know, get through to other people that I thought were so far away from me, you
Mhm.
know? And it's not that I thought that they were like, you know, gonna, I don't know, it's just different. It's just scary.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
just a little scary, to be honest,
Uh-huh.
to step foot into an environment you're not quite sure how it's going to be
Mhm.
received.
Yeah.
But I spent enough time doing that to just feel, um, I took a bike ride and I went to I heard this Mexican band, a live band, and they were they were doing the birthday song. I think this must have been a little birthday party or something that they were
Mhm.
doing. And I heard it and I was like, wow, that really takes me back
Mhm.
because we used to always play that song,
Mhm.
you know, and you know, um, so he was like a one-of-a-kind person and an amazing musician, but it was this like really like this human stuff, you know, because of being the fact that he had really absorbed the music around him in California,
Yeah.
and that he wasn't really, you know, it wasn't really like so much trying to play the music of one faraway place,
Hmm.
but just playing bits and pieces of different things from all over. That seemed more appropriate to me
Hmm.
than trying to play bluegrass,
Hmm.
you know, because um, that just seemed a little restrictive,
Hmm.
you know, in terms of trying to copy a music that came from somewhere else. And but Kenny had always been copying music from. It was like um, just how he did it. He had no shame about it.
Yeah.
There was no reason to. And in fact, there was nothing more true because that was all really, it was reflections of his life,
Hmm.
you know? The tunes were like snapshots of a memory that he had.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more authentic than drawing from your own life.
Hmm.
You can't really, you could try to imitate stuff from other places, but you know, it's being able to do that while retaining your own, you know, core
Yeah.
that a lot of people haven't been able to do. So, um,
Well, what do you think about playing maybe a Portuguese tune?
sure. Do you want me to play the mandolin?
Sure. Yeah.
Let me play the mandolin. Um, well, this is the one that I think he would really play the most to get things going in the Portuguese realm.
Do you know the name of that one?
Well, he called it fado,
Okay.
which is really, and it's spelled Fado,
Uh-huh.
and really they say that's a style of music.
Yeah.
The Portuguese fado is like a style of romance. It's usually kind of like slow romantic songs.
Hmm.
Um, so it's been a bit confusing because if I just look up the fado, what comes up, you know, is going to be, it's not usually going to sound quite like that.
Yeah.
Yet, if I play that song to someone who's Portuguese, they recognize it.
Hmm.
They will sing it. And I don't know exactly what it's called, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, we call it fado,
Hmm.
fado, fado, but spelled fado.
Uh-huh.
And uh, believe he learned it from a radio show called Voice of Portugal. He listened to this radio show, I think it was out of Half Moon Bay. And they played a lot of Portuguese music. So there was Fado, there's the Voice of Portugal, there's Ovita, there's the Chamaritas,
Hmm.
which are kind of like fast waltzes. And, you know, the Chamarita has the it has a lot of times this kind of syncopation in it too. So that's a bit of the shimmery to that kind of goes, you're going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, but then all of a sudden it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, like this polyrhythm that's pulling against it.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of that Kenny Hall sound, because the way that when you start to go into that polyrhythm, the way that the mandolin, the way that the notes kind of punch out and really accentuate that rhythm is cool.
Do you think that his repertoire came from all over, but stylistically, in terms of technique, do you think he owed very much to, say, Portuguese musicians, or
No,
was it
because
more
he was
his own?
just guessing. As far as technique, he was just guessing at everything.
Yeah.
I mean, he was handed a mandolin when he was 12 by this guy, W.D. Sanford, and he started playing it with his fingernail.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, the human hand doesn't work that fast. He was only going one way.
Mm-hmm.
And then so he had him go both, back and forth, call it jiggling. So, and I mean, his downs, okay, so if you're using a pick, a down is normally a downbeat.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're sending the pick down. His down was usually on the offbeat. His up was usually on the downbeat. So like everything was just odd the way that he played. And then the fiddle, well, he'd hold the fiddle. Usually people hold this, their chin here or here. He held his fiddle here, like kind of hiked up like that. So his technique was all just wrong, kind of, or it was unique. It was his own. He had his own way of holding it and playing it, which led to his own sound.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was a jazz guitar major at Sonoma State, so I can play jazz standards, but I really like this style of guitar playing that is kind of more influenced by ragtime and folk.
Very nice. What was that one called again?
It's called Storybook Ball.
Storybook Ball.
Yeah, and it has a lot of fun lyrics too, all about these storybook ball characters having a party.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a tongue twister.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I don't want to do it right now because I'm a little afraid I'm gonna say
Twist
something
your
wrong.
tongue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it is a really good one because I have a children's book,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been working on pieces that reflect that or can kind of supplement that. So I've been adding to my repertoire. Um, Things that interest me in particular are jug band songs
Mm-hmm.
because my book is the ABCs of jug band music. So I jug band songs, songs for children, songs about books.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so storybook ball because you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about books, songs that are about letters, songs that are about numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bit like Schoolhouse Rock or Sesame Street, and it's I'm drawing from that kind of inspiration
Uh-huh.
right now
Yeah.
because since I have one book already, out there, I'd like to do more of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I have ideas about more follow-up books. I'd actually like to I like to make a children's book about Kenny Hall. That's one of my um, big next goals. I have a few of them. I have a Broadway musical that I'm trying to write, working on little by little. I came up with the idea, and it has a jug band theme too.
Uh-huh.
So it ties into the whole jug band thing. Is my jug band musical is called Buskerville, and then I'm gonna make a children's book about Kenny Hall because I found this whole genre of children's books about musicians. Like there's a children's book about Django Reinhardt.
Mm-hmm.
There are children's books that have been made about that are biographical but kind of broken down in a way that makes for a good children's book. And Kenny's life story would be amazing for that. It
Mm-hmm.
truly would. You know, um, being blind, going to boarding school, moving, going to school, leaving his home when he was 6 years old to go live at the school for the blind.
Yeah.
And then meeting all these different musicians from all over and learning from them. And then, it's a lot of stuff that you just kind of leave out there because, it's not important. There's
Uh-huh.
children's book. But, fast forward to where he was rediscovered
Yeah.
in the 60s and then became a hero
Yeah.
and shared this music that he had played with all these different people, with all these new people that wanted to follow in that and wanted to know, um, became curious about those old songs that he had liked that everyone around him, a lot of people were not that interested in it. So, he's a real hero.
Mm-hmm.
His story is heroic by how much he accomplished, how much joy he gave to people, how
Mm-hmm.
much inspiration he gave to people. It's a human story that's amazing to see how much we're capable of, you
Yeah.
know, and how adversity can how people can overcome adversity, stuff like that. So I'd really like to make a children's book about Kenny Hall. Um, I'm working on a series of calendars for music teachers,
Mm-hmm.
teaching how to play in all 12 keys using the 12 months of the
Ah.
year. I've been
Yeah.
developing that a lot in the last few months,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something it's another print object. Like it's not a book, but a calendar
Mm-hmm.
can be like a book because you can put a lot of little bits of information in it,
Yeah.
you know. And then the musical Caterpillar, which is my own life story. made into a children's book. I'm working on that too.
Cool.
All these ideas finally came to me because um, originally it was just this one idea. You know, it's like kind of a fluke. I think I wrote a song that would make a good book.
Hmm.
I had no ideas beyond that. And then people would ask me, occasionally they'll ask me, oh, are you going to do an ABCs of classical music? Are you going to do an ABCs of jazz next?
Yeah.
And the answer is probably not. But I'm not going to rule it out because it maybe,
Yeah.
maybe. But I really want to use the ABCs of jug band music to further jug band music,
Hmm.
that style in particular,
Yeah.
because there's something about it not really being a style.
Yeah.
It's literally, you're talking about homemade instruments. So you're breaking it down to the basics of the physics of music.
Hmm.
How do you make a string? How, there's a wind instrument, you know, it's that introduction that jug band music has that goes along with that age range of learning the alphabet.
Hmm.
Because I remember being like that age and wanting to play on pots and pans and stuff.
Hmm.
So I think that's the age where a lot of kids are ready to explore and start to maybe even make a little band out of, homemade percussion and homemade string instruments,
Yeah.
homemade kazoos, homemade like whatever. They could do that, and a lot of people could use a lot of help with it,
Hmm.
because it's not that easy to build a wash tub bass or just, and especially if you're not that musical, if you don't really have so I've been trying to give people more ideas. you know One thing is like familiar music.
Hmm.
Having music that you are familiar with is super important.
Hmm.
And though I think the music I learned is super important because I think it's beautiful music,
Hmm.
I don't know if it's always the best choice for getting through to people because a lot of people don't recognize it. They
Yeah.
might recognize Turkey in the Straw because the ice cream song. But what I'm saying is you might get more interaction within a family
Hmm.
if you pull from like maybe 80s pop music. And I haven't really followed that trend of wanting to do modern music in a folk tradition before.
Hmm.
I haven't really gone that route previously, but I'm wanting to now.
Hmm.
Now's the right time because um, there's still a lot of really good songs too that are
Hmm.
modern and that ones that people recognize.
Hmm.
And it's easier for them to participate with each other. It's easier
Yeah.
for them to get pulled in by something that they like and that they're familiar with.
Yeah.
And um, so I want to do jug band versions of lots of different things
Hmm.
rather than lots of different things done as an alphabet song.
Hmm.
There's lots of ways to grow and build on what I did. And yeah, maybe one of these days it'll be a more alphabet books. But
Well, before we sign off, how can people find your book and your music and all that?
well, the ABCs of jug band music is something you can just Google and look up on Facebook and Instagram, YouTube, all those places. I think you can find that by just Googling that. My name, Morgan Cochneuer, MorganCochneuer.com is my website.
Hmm.
And that has the portal to everything. So um, I should probably update my website. I'll be working on that next. Oh, I added over like 100 videos to my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is my name.
Hmm.
Just so I'm on YouTube. My Instagram is ABC Jug Band. My Twitter is Jug Band Literacy. So I should probably like condense these names and just figure out a quicker, easier way to, you know. But I'm working on it. My
Yeah,
whole thing was designed to like stand outside a bookstore or inside the bookstore and just play music and just get people's attention in person like that.
right. Yeah.
And then and then the pandemic happened and my book signing tour was canceled. And so I've never been a like and subscribe my channel type of person, but I'm learning to be,
Yeah,
because I do want people to like and subscribe those things.
right.
I want them. I want to invite them into my world that I've been creating, where I'm taking all these different things, music I learned from Kenny Hall, and my love of the children's books and stuff that passions I had when I was younger, like writing and drawing and stuff. I kind of want to get into those more because I think those would help me, grow more in that writing direction. I'm
Hmm.
in kind of a unique place because I don't have, I know a lot of musicians. I still don't know a lot of writers and people who have
Hmm.
written books or published books. So there's hardly anyone I can talk to like, you know, get advice from or share ideas with. But I'm making those connections.
Hmm.
So um, yeah, my name and ABCs of jug band music. You just type those into any search engine. Ultimately, they should pop up with me and stuff.
Well, thanks so much for your time and
Yeah,
welcoming us into your world today. And
thanks
um,
for having me.
yeah, hopefully we'll see you around town.
Okay.